Hey VC, how's it going? So real quick, before I get into it, I want to give big thanks to everyone that supports my channel, either by subscribing, liking, commenting, all that good stuff. Um, it really is encouraging to have, not that I have like a huge like fan base or whatever. I mean, I don't even really consider myself like, you know, on some kind of weird level above you guys. I'm just kind of joining the conversation or the larger community that is the VC. But I want to thank you guys anyway for supporting me as I've been starting out. I mean, this calendar year is wrapping up pretty quickly, so you know, people are kind of making videos about, you know, how the year went, and it was a good year for me. I mean, I only started making videos a couple months ago, but I've received a lot of support. I think I'm up to 168 subs. Not long ago, I just hit 100, and then hopefully I'll hit 200 pretty soon. I don't think I'll do a contest when I hit 200, but it's just, you know, kind of a cool milestone to get to. Every 100 is cool, even though it's completely arbitrary. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys so much for the words of encouragement and the nice discussion. I try to leave a comment on you guys' videos whenever I feel like I have something to add to the conversation, you know. I think I could do a little bit better of thinking of more creative things to say and more things to say in general. So yeah, thank you guys very much. Now, this will probably be my last video before Christmas, which is coming up very quickly. It won't be my last video before the end of the year or anything like that. I'll have probably a couple more. I'll definitely have at least one more top 10 video. Get through one of these a week, you know, probably 1 or 2 additional videos a week as well, especially next week when I have, you know, a lot of vacation time after Christmas. So anyway, I'll just get right into it. This is part 2 of my top 10 series. This will be number 90 through 81. And in a few weeks, I'll be done with this, and you guys will know how my top 100 albums are. So I'll start out. It's been 2 minutes already in this video. Quit wasting time. Number 90 is Led Zeppelin, Houses of the Holy. I guess minor spoilers for the rest of the list. This is my favorite Led Zeppelin album. Now that might be kind of a polarizing opinion, but to me this is the best thing they did, even if solely for the track No Quarter, which is probably my favorite Led Zeppelin track. But it's just a solid track list all the way through. I wouldn't really say that there's a bad one on here except for what was it? I mean, The Crunch is just okay. It's not a bad song or anything. I can think of at least, you know, 1 or 2 songs in every one of their albums that I think is kind of bad, honestly. I'm not a big fan of like the Lemon song or, you know, like the Battle of Evermore. They're kind of bleak spots on those albums for me. But this I like front to back basically, and then they have a good variety of different sounds they do. They have that song Jamaica. I think it's supposed to be pronounced Jamaica. I've heard a lot of weird pronunciations of that. I've heard like Dire Maker and things like that. I think I read something about it's supposed to be like with a British accent, you say Jamaica. Anyway, good album, good band. I don't want to make it seem like I hate Led Zeppelin or anything. It's just they don't typically go into my top 100 albums. Next up, 89, Paul Simon, Graceland. Just a classic album, stone cold classic. I think everyone needs to have this in their collection. If you're even remotely a fan of guitar-based music, because it's a good introduction, I think, to world music, obviously, with all the South African the musicians on here. Or even like the more traditional, you know, folk rock songs like Graceland. It's just a great story, kind of an homage to Elvis. And then basically every other song does have that cool South African instrumentation with like fretless bass and cool drums and things like that. This album, I mean, the songwriting is solid because it is Paul Simon. I think he's one of the, you know, probably top 20 songwriters of all time. But I think for me, the production is like, you know, crystal clear, nice and polished, which there is a time and place for that, I feel. Not everything has to be rough and ragged all the time. And the musicianship and the arrangements are just what makes this album for me. 88. New Order's first album, Movement. I've only recently learned this about the artwork, is that this is clearly an F up here, and this is an L. So Factory Records is what the F stands for, and L is the Roman numeral 50. This is, you know, Factory Records' 50th release. New Order's first album, 1981, a year after Ian Curtis's death. They're kind of still trying to find their sound, which I think is really interesting. Because they're still using Martin Hannett for production, so it still has kind of the bleak post-punk production, but it's a little more heavy on the synthesizer, leaning more towards the kind of new wave pop sound that they would go to, that I'm a pretty big fan of as well. But their early stuff is really what does it for me. Everything from 1980 through probably 84 I'm a big fan of, 85 around there. But the stuff from like 80 to 82 especially. The thing is, there's not really any standout tracks on here. No big singles. Well, I mean, there's no singles and things like that on here. It's all just kind of one piece, and it is not the shortest thing ever. It's like 35 minutes or something, but it's not, you know, it's not like a 45-minute standard length album. It feels slightly short. It definitely feels like they're struggling to find the thing, like the sound that they want, and they're struggling to write songs. They are still, I think there's like 2 songs that were written by Ian Curtis on here, and then that's, you know, 2 out of 8 of the songs are like that, and then the rest are kind of not trying to imitate, but trying to, you know, to keep around that same kind of post-punk sound, even though they were leaning more towards synthesizers, like on Closer. But yeah, anyway, just cool. It is kind of bleak, like I said, but there's like great drum machine on a couple tracks, good synthesizers in general. This is kind of, you know, in the same vein as Movement, as Closer, like I keep saying, in that, and kind of that cool blend of post-punk darkness with like new wave dance pop appeal. It's a cool middle ground between those. 87 here, Smashing Pumpkins, Siamese Dream. This is signed by somebody. I didn't get it signed myself. I bought this as a used copy, and I don't remember who it was signed by. Not one of the original members of the band, I don't think. Just one of the touring members that that Billy Corgan was taking around with him, playing Smashing Pumpkins songs. Anyway, this is their second album. It's kind of a classic of the 90s. It's got tons of hits on it. Really, the first half of this album is packed with hits. If I can find a track listing here somewhere. But anyway, you know, like Sherbrooke and Today and Disarm. And there's, you know, kind of going into the same kind of sound that they would use on Melancholy and Infinite Sadness, which is another great album that I would like to own. It's just, you know, there's no real cheap version of that album. I have it on CD and cassette. Anyway, the same kind of sound that they would go into that, like there's strings on Disarm, there's heavy songs on here too, plenty of songs in the middle, kind of sweet or gentle, and then with hints of like that edginess, you know, edginess. Just a great album. Kind of at a loss for words to say about it, which I kind of feel bad because I feel like I'm not doing it justice. But if you've never heard Smashing Pumpkins before, this is a great place to jump in. You'll immediately probably recognize Sherbrooke, I think. But great 90s album here. This is like the 2011 reissue or whatever. Next up was 90, 89, 88, 87. This is 86. Killers, Hot Fuss. 2004 album. This is an original pressing, which, you know, I paid up for this a couple years ago, like 2014. Immediately after buying it, they announced the repress on standard black vinyl, and you can get that anywhere for like $15 now. But that's happened to me a few times where I pony up for an original, reissue announced right afterwards. This was really hard to find for a long time. This is kind of in the vein of, you know, like the early Strokes, early Interpol, Franz Ferdinand, those kinds of things. Not like not like straight post-punk. This has way more pop appeal than I think a lot of those bands did. Or mainstream radio rock appeal. Stuff like, you know, Mr. Brightside. I mean, Mr. Brightside is top 100 songs of all time for me. Not necessarily lyrically, but just musically. That's kind of a perfect song in my opinion. And this album, I won't say every song is perfect, but like just the whole A side. I think every single song on the A side was a radio hit. And what was I gonna say? There's not really a bad song on it. And their second album is really good too, but I don't have that on vinyl. And that would probably squeeze in the top 150. It's not very far behind this album for me at all. But this is original. There's the track listing, kind of a sparse back cover. And then it's on this cool dark blue vinyl. This was very rare. I won't say how much I paid for it, but I did kind of pay online prices, even though I bought it in a record store. And not long after that at all, like within probably 6 months of me buying this, they announced the reissue for like $19.99. Now it's down to $15, like I said. But yeah, I'm not bitter or anything. Great album. Glad I have this version. I wouldn't give this up for anything. And then just perfect 10, really. I think all these are my top 100 are perfect 10s. And that was kind of the hard part about, you know, how do you put the perfect 10s ahead of other perfect 10s. I'm already losing count again. 85, Beatles Revolver. What needs to be said about this album? I think I'll just kind of talk briefly about probably one of my favorite Beatles tracks of all time. Definitely one of my favorite John Lennon tracks of all time. I'm Only Sleeping, track 3 on here. It's another one of the typical John, you know, this middle period Beatles, like the John Lennon, I'm tired of being married, I'm looking for something else in my life. He's really, I guess, looking for Yoko, and he doesn't even know it yet. Anyways, I'm Only Sleeping is a cool psychedelic track. Vinyl Richie, you discussed this album as being not a great psych album because the Paul McCartney tracks kind of are not very psychedelic, but the John Lennon tracks are, and the George Harrison tracks really are. And I definitely agree with that. But the McCartney songs on here are good. This is definitely like top tier McCartney pop. Even like something like Good Day Sunshine, while it is, I'm not a huge fan of like Sunshine Pop, that is probably the pinnacle example of what a Sunshine Pop song is. And then stuff like For No One, which is a pretty straightforward ballad with you know, like a French horn solo and everything. It's kind of a Baroque piano track. It's still a great song. And then Tomorrow Never Knows, the closer, is one of the trippiest things I've ever heard. Which, you know, I'm still kind of exploring psychedelic music, but I remember it was used in the ending of one of the later episodes of Mad Men. They always close out their episodes with a song, you know, whether it's like a big hit or not is depending on the episode. But one of them ends with Tomorrow Never Knows. It's the main character listening to the Beatles for the first time. That's the first song he ever hears, and he rips the needle off the record like 2/3 of the way through the song. It's pretty hilarious, actually. And the episode just kind of ends in silence because he kind of hated it. But I thought that was a great moment in the show, and the song is awesome. There's lots of backwards guitar on this album. Just a great guitar sound in general on this album. I think they're using those Epiphone Casino guitars. I think Paul was using a Rickenbacker bass at this point. Maybe I'm wrong. And it has like the highest concentration of George Harrison songs, I think, on any Beatles album that isn't the White Album. So like, you know, ratio per songs, it has the highest amount of George Harrison songs, and he's probably my favorite songwriter within the Beatles. And he only gets better and better over time. What is this, 84? Maybe a little bit of a controversial opinion here. I don't know if you guys know this album too well. This is Neutral Milk Hotels, In the Airplane Over the Sea. This album came out in like 98, I think. This is a kind of a modern reissue, not that it's too different from the original, but it's on Merge Records. It's in one of these kind of pinkish clear sleeves, you can see. It's 180 gram, all that. Pretty sparse packaging. It doesn't have any writing on the labels. It has a cool image of an airplane phonograph thing, and it does come with an insert though, with lyrics and credits. Pull this out. Kind of small. I love kind of the imagery with this album. You know, the probably early 1900s sort of aesthetic, and then musically it's straightforward, kind of, well, not too straightforward. It's sort of lo-fi. If I had to throw it in a genre, if I had to pigeonhole it, it's straightforward lo-fi folk rock, heavy on the folk, and lots of times heavy on the rock, heavy on the psychedelic elements as well. Kind of fuzzy bass whenever the electric bass is in there. Overdriven guitars at times, super loud drums. I think you can kind of chalk that up to not being recorded very well. But the band consists of Jeff Mangum, who's the only member whose name I know, I'm sorry, with guitar and vocals, songwriting. There's a drummer, a horn player, and a guy that plays a lot of like weird auxiliary instruments. One of the most common ones here being called the singing saw, which is where they just take a normal hand saw, bend the blade a little bit to change the pitch, and drag a violin bow across, and it makes kind of a spooky, wobbly sound with lots of vibrato. And then, yeah, it makes for kind of a unique album, and the songs on here are kind of loosely based around like the Diary of Anne Frank and kind of sort of dark stuff like that. But great album, check it out. One of the best of the 90s in my opinion. I'm sure many of you know that, and many of you probably do not know that, and many of you actually probably hate that album. It's kind of a polarizing album because the singer's voice, you either love it or hate it. Anyways, what is this? 83. Classic here, Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here. This is not my favorite Pink Floyd album. I think this is the first one I've talked about on this list, but Wish You Were Here, great tribute to Syd Barrett. The tracks, basically every song is a tribute to Syd Barrett. Think about it. Cool concept with the artwork. I'll show this off real quick because I'm sure many of you know this again, but the elements, this is fire, this is earth on the back, wind, and water, and obviously, you know, Shine On You Crazy Diamond, which takes up like more than half of the album, I think. Just, you know, some of their best recorded stuff, I think. Welcome to the Machine, again, another kind of tribute to Syd Barrett. Have a Cigar, kind of a comment on them starting out as a band, you know, signing to a record contract and all that. And Wish You Were Here, pretty, sometimes direct, sometimes indirect ballad for Syd Barrett. And I think he showed up, not during the recording of this album, but during the recording of The Wall. They hadn't seen him in like 10 years or something. I don't know the story of Pink Floyd that well. Many of you know it better than I do, but I'm kind of telling a very haphazard kind of story about it from what I know. Anyway, original US pressing. This was actually kind of hard to find around me for some reason, so I didn't have it for the longest time. The first time I ever heard it was digitally. I do think the break you have to take for flipping the album in between Welcome to the Machine and Have a Cigar does kind of help with the pacing better than just listening to it straight through digitally. But yeah, one of those albums where I think a lot has been said about it, and I'm kind of at a loss for words to say something kind of unique, so I think I'll just kind of move on. 82, Bucto Twins, Heaven or Las Vegas. I bought this one kind of recently, but it's grown on me super fast, as has a lot of their discography. I've been kind of diving into that over recent times. With this album, I forget the singer's name. I can look at the credits real quick. I'm real bad about remembering names of artists that I want to talk about specifically, but oh man, that's gonna bug me. You know the singer of this band. They're a three-piece, pretty standard guitar slash bass, drums, and vocals. But they're so good at least on this album, kind of layering their sound with lots of overdubs and things like that. And again, there is a great place for that. Not everything has to be so sparse and underproduced. I think there is a time for, I wouldn't say overproduced, because it does kind of generate a certain sound. And if you're going for a sound like this, then you definitely need to have layers and have just a giant wall of sound, basically, with lots of overdubs. And the vocals are a great example of that, because she's self-harmonizing, you know, with different tracks of her own vocals, making layers upon layers. Same with the guitars. I feel like there's tracks on here with multiple drum tracks running at a time. Just makes a huge sound. It's like a huge, like, dreamy, kind of ethereal, kind of wavy sound. I think it's come out in 1990, so it's, you know, they were a band, like more of a post-punk band earlier in the 80s, and then they kind of developed into this dream pop sound, which was heavy inspiration for a lot of the dream pop bands like Slow Dive and like My Bloody Valentine, who got more into shoegaze, like Dive and Ride and all those guys. But fantastic album. Really been growing on me lately. Obviously, it shot all the way up to 82 at this point, even though I just bought it recently and I've only gotten into it in the past couple months. But Cocteau Twins, something I need to get more into. And 81, this is the first instance of, or I think it's the first instance on my list of a David Bowie album. This is Heroes. This is my copy of Heroes. You all kind of know this album. This is, you know, I think the second album of his Berlin trilogy. The second one within the year of 1982 or 1977. Heavily featuring Brian Eno, one of my favorite musicians of all time at this point, and Robert Fripp on several tracks, who obviously shows up on the legendary track Heroes. That's, again, one of my favorite tracks of all time. I think whenever people think of this album, they definitely think of that song. There are other good songs on here. The same with his other 1977 album. The first side of this is more, I guess, more straightforward David Bowie songs, you know, with like verse, chorus, guitar and drum based songs with vocals. And then the second side is more Brian Eno influenced, almost ambient tracks. Like V2 Schneider is a great song. Sense of Doubt, kind of blending into Moss Garden and Nucleon, I think is how you pronounce that. Just these kind of electronic tracks, ambient. I don't want to say experimental because they're not really too crazy. They are kind of beautiful. And then the closer, Secret Life of Arabia, goes back into more of a straightforward song for the most part. But yeah, just great album. All-time classic artwork too. I mean, look at that. And one of my favorite Bowies for sure. Anyways, that's through my 80s on my list. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys are looking forward to the rest of this list. I think I've gotten a lot of positive feedback for this, so I'll definitely be continuing this. And let me know what you guys think about the stuff that I showed. And yeah, thank you guys. Have a Merry Christmas. Happy holidays, whatever you want to call it. See ya.